everybody, and welcome back to another Big Finish audio drama review. In today's review we're going to be taking a trip back to Kaldor, as I'm going to be taking a look at the latest volume of the Doctor Who spin-off series, The Robots, featuring Liv Chenka, as portrayed by Nicola Walker, alongside her sister Liv Chenka, as portrayed by Claire Rushbrook. This series is available to order now on the Big Finish website. The physical CD box set is £24.99 and the download is £19.99. There's also a trailer on the Big Finish website that can be listened to, as well as additional story details. Now, something that I would like to point out for this series in particular is on Big Finish, where you wish to purchase multiple box sets from a certain series, the likes of The Robots, bundles are available. And the reason why I mention that is because The Robots is a series that you can't necessarily cherry pick, or at least if you do cherry pick, you won't be able to fully appreciate the story, because there will be certain plot arc elements that have been pre-established within the previous box sets that you will not be aware of. So The Robots is one of those series where if you are interested by what I say throughout this review, I recommend going back to the very beginning, maybe even watching my previous reviews for this series, then starting from the bottom and working your way through in chronological order, because the plot arc of this series is very direct and it is the key thread of this series that ties everything together. I think that Volume 3 in particular certainly returns to the foundational roots of this series, and overall it makes for a really gripping listen. So taking a look at the production credits on the Big Finish website, the cover artist for this series is Ryan Ampling, and once again he has done an absolutely excellent job. The directors for this series is Ken Bentley and Louise Jameson, that's right, Leela herself. The music has been created by Joe Kramer, the producer is David Richardson, the script editor is John Dorney, the sound design by Lee Adams and Toby Hydrick Robertson. The episodes have been written by Robert Whitelock, Lisa McMullen and Guy Adams, and of course we do have characters within this box set which are based on characters as seen throughout the Fourth Doctor story of The Robots of Death, as written by Chris Boucher, and of course the executive producers are Nicholas Briggs and Jason Haig Ellery. So very much like the previous volumes, as a part of this series, we have 3 one-hour episodes. All of them are separate, written by different writers. However, all of them are intertwined, as we do have that plot arc throughout this series, but all of the episodes go and do different things. We see different locations, different environments, and it makes each episode stand out. In particular, of course, episode 1 and 3 are focused around the Chenka sisters, and episode 2 is focused around Toos and Pool, of course, from The Robots of Death. So this series is in fact following exactly the same format to that of Volume 2, having that standalone Toos and Pool story in the very middle, which was a very welcome format return, in particular for me, who really enjoyed the second episode of the previous box set. So the first one is The Mystery of Sector 13, as written by Robert Whitelock. Episode 2 is Circuit Breaker, as written by Guy Adams, and episode 3 is A Matter of Conscience, as written by Lisa McMullen. So the first thing that I want to mention for this Big Finish review is that I was wrong. When this series was initially announced, along with quite a number of Big Finish listeners, I was a little bit sceptical, to say the least. I didn't really see why we needed a series focused around the Vok robots from The Robots of Death, and I didn't really know if Liv Chenka would be able to have her own series, if she would be a good protagonist and key focus for a series as a whole, in particular for 4 whole box sets. And there was a part of me that was thinking, are Big Finish simply milking a popular companion for the sake of it? And I went into the first volume and I was still thinking that. I was wondering, is this series actually going to work? And here we are, Volume 3, and yes, it does work. All 3 volumes so far have been brilliant in their own right, and what I really like about this series is that it has a direction, it has a purpose, and you know that you're going to go into this series and you're going to further the narrative of the plot arc of this series as a whole, because each episode has an aim. It wishes to explore a different area of technology and the relationship with that technology on the planet of Kaldor. And we are 3 volumes in, and each box set has done something a little bit experimental, a little bit different, and it is admittedly a series that is worth checking out, because we have a rather interesting commentary on technology and the relationship of technology, that even though we are on an alien world, we can kind of apply it to society on Earth. And in particular, if you are a fan of artificial intelligence, Black Mirror, and all that dystopian sci-fi stuff, then this series is very much for you. And the reason why I mention that concept of direction is because some of the other series that Big Finish produce, in particular the ones that seem to be a bit more longer lasting, sometimes don't have that direction. I think even Jagon Lightfoot can fall victim to that to some extent in some series, where you just have a block of adventures and you don't really know where it is going, and it does kind of feel a little bit filler. In particular, a certain series that stands out to me that falls victim to that quite a lot is Unit the New Series. There is quite a lot of box sets within that are very, very good. However, once you get past the 4th volume, it all seems to get a little bit muddled from that point onwards. You feel like time has passed between different characters, developments have been made here and there off audio that we've not got to see, and it feels ever so slightly disjointed. And we get the box sets here and there that you kind of think, okay, this box set had a few decent episodes, however, there was quite a lot of filler in there as well. The Robots is different to that, because you've got a series that has 3 episodes each per volume. Each episode contributes to the overall narrative of the series, and to be honest, as soon as you start listening to it again, you are immersed within this planet, within the society of Kaldor, and you basically pick up from where you left off within the series, and by the very end of the volume, and to be honest, for me as a listener, I'm hooked, I'm wanting to find out more, and I want to know what happens next. So without further ado, let's take a look at the episodes as a part of this box set. So we start off with the mystery of Sector 13, as written by Robert Whitelock. Now, something of which that I would like to point out is this episode, along with the other episodes of this box set, do involve characters that have been previously established in the other box sets. So we do very much get that sense of a reoccurring cast, a family of reoccurring characters that we've met with in previous episodes. It is nice, it's returning back to a format and returning back to some familiar faces, and in particular for this opening episode of the box set, we kind of return to the foundational elements and the main focus of this series as a whole being the Sons of Kaldor, basically an extremist/terrorist organisation which are against the Vok robots, or at least believe that they shouldn't have the involvement within society that they currently do. From what we understand, they believe that the reliance on this technology is threatening Kaldor society, and we're kind of unsure exactly what their aims are at this point within the series. Liv is in fact on the search for the Sons of Kaldor, and we have this whole concept of clandestine gang-related crime throughout this episode, which I love. I absolutely love dramas like this. I love the likes of Bodyguard and Line of Duty, as written by Jed Mercurio, and this series reminds me of that. It's a sci-fi interpretation of that, as we see Liv tracking down a rather unusual activity that occurs within Sector 13, where loads of people end up falling ill emotionally at the same time, so they go to investigate and a few things are uncovered. Simultaneously, we have Liv Chenka off investigating into certain matters relating to the Vok robots' past, and we soon find out that certain historical elements of the Vok robots have started to be covered up, and this is something that isn't merely speculation. This is things that has happened within the previous box sets within this series, the likes of the Leisure Massacre within, I do believe, Volume 1, as well as the Visi experiment. All of these events have been wiped from the database and no longer exist, and Tula wants to find out why. I think that Robert Whitelock is excellent because he has written some of the previous episodes as a part of this series, and it is key that he understands the whole concept of technology, but even more so how creepy it can be. It really does have that sense of something lurking underneath, this unknown truth behind the Vok robots, and things aren't quite what they seem. It's definitely relating to the certain people that we have throughout the series as well, the recurring characters. You're kind of thinking, do I trust you? Do I trust you? Even to the extent of the Chenka sisters as well. Are their intentions fully in good faith? In particular for the Vok robots themselves, they are as excellent as ever. They're always very eerie because they just have no expression whatsoever. Of course, they are voiced by several people throughout this series, including Claire Rushbrook herself, of course, Liv Chenka, as well as John Culshaw making a return, and both of them do a very good job of having that very emotionless, monotone voice, and again, that is carried across all 3 episodes within this box set. I think one of the key things to take from the mystery of Sector 13 is that we are starting to edge closer and closer to to certain areas of the series coming together. As I've already mentioned, of course, episode 2 relates to Pool and Toos, of course, from the Robots of Death. However, we have certain elements of evidence linking the Chenka sisters and Toos and Pool together, because at this point within the series, they still haven't come face to face. Now we move on to Circuit Breaker, as written by Guy Adams, the Toos and Pool contribution for this box set, and once again, it does something different. Of course, within the previous volume, we in fact had a rather stark change in environment, because we've gone from a lot of cityscape Kaldor stories, and then within episode 2 of volume 2, we were taken to the deserted drylands of Kaldor, in a very small village microcosm of society, where people didn't quite trust each other, and old Vok robots were taken to these villages because they were no longer needed within the city. This time round we have a little bit more involvement from Pool. He in fact is now living within the city, and of course Toos decides to go and see him. He's living in an area of Kaldor which is a little bit questionable, which is another one of the compliments that I have for this series as a whole, not just volume 3 but volume 1 and 2 as well. Kaldor as a planet is arguably some of the best world building that I've seen on Big Finish in quite some time. It is Jago and Lightfoot level equivalent of world building, where you had that society within Victorian London and the familiar faces of Inspector Quick and of course Lisa Bauman, as of course Ellie Higson, and we had the Red Tavern pub and the various streets of London, including Shad Thames and all of that. We had this sense of atmosphere and environment that was built across the box sets. Kaldor is the same as that, and throughout this series we have lots of variety. We have in episode 1 Liv investigating a rather deprived area of Kaldor, where people are living in high-rise buildings which are highly populated, arguably more populated than they should be because a lot of the people have been crammed in. And then likewise for this episode we kind of have not the slums of the city, a little bit of a troubled area with lots of troubled people. Of course there's a lot of gang crime as suggested throughout the plot of this episode, where things get stolen, including the likes of Vok robots, which it's fair to say they get a little bit of a beating throughout this episode. I really want to praise Guy Adams for the variety, because even though we have Toos and Pool returning, these two episodes do something that's completely different. Of course you have the deserted story within volume 2, and this one is focused around again that relationship with Vok robots, but it gets a bit more close and personal. David Collins in particular as Pool, he is great, honestly, he's a great character, but considering that he's the lead of this episode along with Toos, and we've never really had a focus on these characters before, it just feels right. You instantly like them, you're instantly immersed within the environment that they live within, and likewise for Toos as well. Admittedly, she's a bit more reserved throughout this story, and perhaps I would have liked to see a bit more from her, but a lot of focus on Pool as it's one of the strongest elements of the story, so we kind of lose one character to favour the other, which I suppose is kind of okay. But we have this whole concept of his fear of the Vok robots relating all the way back to the events of the Sand Miner, of course within the Robots of Death where everything first started. Again, this is one of those episodes where I'm going to try and avoid talking about the actual plot itself, because it does pretty much take on the format of a murder mystery, and as a result, Toos and Pool kind of fall into the Inspector, Sherlock and John Watson kind of trope. So I think that Pamela Salem and David Collins once more do a very good job within that role, but it is a little bit like a whodunit. You want to guess who did it, you need to piece together all of the evidence. There's a few clues here and there as well to help the listener through, which I think is a really lovely touch, and to be honest, I found it quite gripping. I think it's probably my least favourite episode of the box set, but that's not to say that this episode is bad. I think the whole standard of this box set overall is very high indeed, and I think that this episode does something different, and that is the most important thing. This volume of adventures concludes with A Matter of Conscience, as written by Lisa McMullen, and it is a really nice conclusion piece for this box set, as well as tying together a few threads throughout the previous stories. It kind of relates back to the environment that we get to see within episode 1, so once again we return to the heart of Kaldor City, but this time round we have a number of terrorist acts. The Sons of Kaldor have taken responsibility, so we get kind of a commentary on terrorism and extremist acts, and the Sons of Kaldor kind of stepping over that territory of an activist organisation who merely do not like the Vok robots into threatening terrorists who basically end up killing people as well as Vok robots in order to try and prove a point. And in particular, I think one of the main things that we get to see throughout this story that contributes to the plot of this series overall is which side are you on? Are you on the side of the company who are creating the Vok robots, which kind of puts the Chenka sisters in a rather shaky territory, or are you on the side of the Sons of Kaldor who believe that humans should rule supreme on the planet of Kaldor and the Vok robots should be at minimal roles? This certainly shouldn't have as much involvement within society as what they currently do, taking on these key roles such as newsreaders, pharmacists, doctors, as they gradually take more and more of society away from the real life humans. One of the main things that I took from this story was the fact that it is very futuristic. Once again, we have these riots taking place because of the Vok robots, and we also have a few flying cars in there as well. There is a moment where the Chenka sisters are flying to an explosion within a factory that have created some super Voks, and that's of course been set up by the Sons of Kaldor. And it just kind of made me think, if this was a visual TV show or a cartoon, you'd have flying cars everywhere. It would be a bit like New Earth, and I think that would be really cool to visualise. It would be one of those series that I think would actually have quite a lot of potential as a spin-off, and again, that is solely down to the Chenka sisters because they are very good protagonists. They have different skills. Tula is a character that is very intelligent, however she works for the company, so she's very hands-on, involved within the heart of the problem, I suppose, within this spin-off. And then you have Liv Chenka, who has had a lot of development throughout this series. We get to see her doing stuff relating to her medic qualifications, of course, we don't really see too much of within the 8th Doctor adventures, but also we get to see her exercise skills that she has learned on her travels with the Doctor. And I've certainly grown a lot of respect for Liv throughout listening to this series that I kind of wish we got to see more of within the Paul McGann series. I'd also like to give an additional compliment to that of John Shaw, who plays Sorkov, because he plays a rather key role throughout this story, as well as having a number of references throughout episode 1, and he does a very good job, but also his character is kind of the key point that we take from this story that is going to be pursued with the later elements of this series. And again, it's focused around technology because the Vok robots are forever developing. We've seen a lot of creepy things occur with the Vok robots throughout the previous volumes. We've had the Visi project, where basically we had a robotic child. Then in this story we have a Vok robot that is questioning the concept of morality, where we have this concept of two parents that have been struck by the factory explosion. You can either save both of them, however kill the third person. That said third person just so happens to be their child, or you can save the child, but that will almost certainly kill the parents. The Vok robot is trying to decide which route he needs to pursue, and a number of those concepts throughout the earlier episodes of this series trying to balance out humanity, decision making, and ultimately that flaw because they are missing that human link. I think that compared to Volumes 1 and Volumes 2, we don't really have that key technological development throughout this series as such. As I've mentioned, we had Visi in one of the previous volumes, and then in the other volume we also had the concept of artificial intelligence and basically that possibly creating a terrorist attack. Then in this box set is a bit more focused around Chenka and Tusum Pool and kind of their relationship with the Vok robots, and more importantly, them investigating into the roots of Kaldor City. But I imagine that Volume 4 is going to return solely to technology, as we have a few further developments to the Vok robots which have been made. So there we have it, that is The Robots Volume 3, starring Nicola Walker, Claire Rushbrook, David Collins and Pamela Salem. Overall for this series, again, thoroughly enjoyable, and I was instantly hooked. As soon as I click play on episode 1, I basically binge listened to the entire 3 hours of this volume, and now I can't wait for the next one. Although admittedly, every time I come back to this series, I do need to kind of check back on my notes to see what has happened within the previous volumes. So very much like how I said at the very beginning of this review has interested you, or if you feel like the plot of this series is something that intrigues you to find out a bit more, I definitely recommend going back to the very beginning, listening to Volume 1, then going on to Volume 2 and so on, listening to the series in chronological order, because each volume builds on that narrative and builds on Kaldor as a city overall, and to be quite honest, I'm looking forward to seeing where this series goes next. It's dramatic, it's gripping, it's thrilling, but it also has that whole concept of truth in there as well. unsolved truth and mystery that truly grips the listener. In particular for me, I do really enjoy it. So yes, it's one of those series that, in all honesty, compared to everything else in the Big Finish catalogue, it's certainly a series to look out for. So there we have it, that is another Big Finish audio drama review. I really hope you have enjoyed it. Do of course stay tuned on The Host Productions for brand new Doctor Who content each and every week, including regular Big Finish audio drama reviews. So thanks for watching, have a nice day, I shall see you all next time. Bye for now.